Hello my dear friends, how are you? My name is Arithurger and today I'm going to talk about Eihwaz, which literally means yew. This is the rune that represents the world axis or the process of gaining spiritual knowledge through the metaphorical process of going up and down the world tree and acquiring the rune mysteries of life and death. Such is our own life of ups and downs, and at some point we all meet in the middle to share our experiences and the wisdom we gained in whichever path we walked through. Most of the concepts associated with Eihwaz are related to trees. Mostly it symbolizes the various mythological trees of Norse mythology: the apple tree, the yew and the ash. All of them connected with both life and death, because it's the ancient Indo-European perception that trees are both connected to the underworld and the upper world, and in between Midgard, our own reality. For those familiar with Norse mythology, it's easier to understand why this rune is connected to the apple tree and the ash, but not much the yew. And I shall develop that further ahead, but suffice to say, it was from yew wood that bows were made, strong, firm and very flexible. Hunting is intimately tied with death that provides life. The killing of an animal turned into a source of food and sustenance, and tied with life that provides death. The bowman who kills other human beings in battle and sends them to the underworld. The symbolical notion of delivering death by pulling the string, and death is certain when we no longer hold the string and let it go. That moment in time between life and death in our hands is the decision that empowers us over the other person who is our target. In ancient graveyards, the yew tree was often found in their vicinity, so it became a symbol of the past growing into the future. From the ground or the realm of the dead comes new life, and this might be a good way to understand the apple tree as one of the trees connected to this rune. Apples were often said to be the fruits of the dead. And I think you will enjoy my previous video about Rune as a goddess who provides immortality through her apples. This is a rune connected with the mysteries of death, the intemporal moments in between of every choice we must take to initiate a path towards wisdom, be that forward or going backwards. Therefore, it's a rune also associated with initiations, towards the hidden secrets, movement towards enlightenment, but also towards confusion, destruction, weakness and death, because those are part of every path towards the deeper knowledge of the hidden secrets. Eihwaz is a rune that governs the initiation into the wisdom of the world tree, as a symbol of the spiritual development that will lead us to spiritual endurance until we are ready to face the darker aspects of life, which is death. It's a rune that symbolizes gaining endurance through hardships, so we might set ourselves free from the fear of death. Now let's move on to the mythology around this rune, and pay close attention because some concepts might change the way we perceive Norse mythology. As previously said, Eihwaz literally means yew, the tree, but it's a rune intimately tied with the concept of the world tree Yggdrasil, so it might not make sense at first, since Yggdrasil is quite often described as an ash tree. The reason why this rune is connected to both the yew tree and the world tree Yggdrasil, it's because Yggdrasil is a yew tree and not an ash. In older poems, Yggdrasil is described as Vedronstarvida, evergreen, and it also has needles. The ash tree isn't an evergreen tree because it sheds its leaves during winter, and of course it doesn't possess needles. This was an error that has been made in the interpretation of the ancient writings, because, for instance, the yew tree in Old Norse was also referred to as Baroskr, which means needle ash. Furthermore, in Norse mythology, the first man created was Ask, meaning ash. It was created from a log of ash tree, and because in the myths Hugin is linked to the awakening of this first man, and Yggdrasil is the tree of Hugin, this reinforced the ideas that Yggdrasil was an ash. Although Yggdrasil simply means Hugin's steed, because Hugin hanged himself on the world tree to acquire the secret knowledge of the runes. But Yggdrasil also means yew column. And this is the typical case of a caning, a composition of words or a form of figurative language used to describe something. For instance, instead of saying the actual word of something or someone, we give it other nouns that we immediately connect them to the actual word. Instead of saying Freyja, Vanadis is used, woman of the Vanir, or Baugit Ulfs, enemy of the wolf, to refer to Hugin instead of saying Hugin. More or less the same thing as when we nowadays call someone a bookworm, someone who reads a lot. So there are many canings for the world tree, and none of them mean ash tree. The only tree originally connected to Yggdrasil was the yew tree. And this is one of the reasons in other videos I warn you about misinterpretations and religious influences on Old Norse mythology. Because the mythology we have today in our hands is not the religious and spiritual perspective of our ancestors. Because with time, things changed a lot, mostly due to misinterpretations and adding new religious concepts. So if Yggdrasil is a yew tree, it starts to make sense why in the historical sources of people who came in contact with the Norse and other Germanic peoples describe human sacrifices in evergreen trees and coniferous types of trees. In pre-Roman Germanic regions, human sacrifices were either hanged or immolated on a yew tree. Also, this might help to reinforce what I've been saying for a long time, that the original god of Scandinavia was Hulr, the hunter, with his bow made of yew wood. Hulr is the god associated with the yew tree, not only because he is a hunter god and bows were often made from yew wood, but he was a death god of Scandinavia, the lord of winter, and so he ruled over the season of Yule, which is a season greatly connected to the entire symbology associated with the yew tree. Just look at the evergreen Christmas tree in our houses during the Yule season. But one day I shall develop this on a video solely for Ullr. The yew tree in early European beliefs was associated with the cults of the dead, which is why in some graveyards or other burial sites they were commonly planted around or in the center of burial sites. Of course, this practice diminished with the introduction of Mediterranean beliefs and planting cypress trees, not only because of other religious beliefs closely connected to the idea of a vertical reality of the afterlife, of up and down, because the cypress grows vertically and doesn't spread its roots, and because of practical terms, precisely because the cypress doesn't spread its roots and therefore it doesn't enter or break graves and other structures in burial sites. But the yew had its role in funerary cults, and because being an evergreen tree and in fact the greenest wood you can find during winter, it was associated with immortality. And here's where it gets interesting, when we mixture science with spiritual beliefs. The needles of the yew tree are poisonous. They contain a toxin that affects the central nervous system. This toxin can be prepared to be used as a powerful hallucinogen. On warm days, the yew emits this toxin and its vapors are concentrated in close proximity to the tree. This can cause hallucinations to any individual who stands right beneath its branches. Now just imagine the impact this scientific discovery has on the concept of Yggdrasil being the tree Hugin used to obtain the secret knowledge of the runes. Think about the entire shamanic connotations surrounding this mythological account. So this also helps to reinforce the fact that Yggdrasil was indeed a yew tree and not an ash, and Rune used its hallucinogenic properties in his shamanic initiation to obtain the secrets contained on the other side. Thus, the connection of this rune, Eihwaz, with initiation, movement towards enlightenment, the mysteries of life and death itself. Rune died in Yggdrasil to obtain primordial wisdom. In a shamanic sense, death is understood as the great initiation into the mysteries of life. To die before we die physically is to discover what is hidden from us, the secret primordial powers. This death to obtain hidden knowledge can be observed in the result of near-death experiences. This is also why I've said previously that this rune is associated with the spiritual endurance we gain to set ourselves free from the fear of death, or rather the fear of physical death, because that fear is one of the greatest traumas that prevents us from truly living in freedom, to have freedom of the mind. Without such fears, nothing prevents our minds to go beyond the mental limitations we have imposed ourselves. This rune is also associated with the myths surrounding apples, immortality and apples being the fruits of the dead. I've already mentioned immortality related to the yew tree, but concerning apples, by the end of this video I shall leave the video about Idun that I've made previously, and I advise you to watch that one so we won't waste time in this video. So we can move on to the meaning of this rune when it appears in a rune reading. When Eihwaz appears in a rune reading, it indicates progress. Even if everything in your life is moving very slowly, a new situation will soon manifest itself and events will speed up so much that you may find it difficult to keep track of everything. It's a sudden change because this rune signifies transition. So when this rune appears, be ready because a major transition is close at hand. This includes death, but it doesn't necessarily have to be actual death. It may just be symbolically. The slow life you were having will die. Your previous path will die. This rune marks a shift into a more profound state of existence. You will most likely pass through the end of a phase and the beginning of another, like a gateway, in a sense of absolute death of the previous life you were having, and be reborn into a new state of existence, into a new path that will change who you are and lead you into a path of constant regeneration until you reach another period of change. Eihwaz is also closely associated with hunting skills, so you must act as though you were an archer. Wait until your target is in sight, be patient, be calm, breathe deeply and slowly, and then, when the moment is right, strike. Release the string and let yourself go forward like the arrow, swiftly, in great speed towards the new changes of life. Precisely because this is a rune of abruptly changes, you were moving slowly and now all goes too fast, you will need to pay close attention to what is happening around you to keep up. Don't worry if you may miss your moment to strike. You will know when to choose the correct time and to act when the occasion arises. Bravery will lead to success. When this rune appears in a rune reading, it will encourage you to gather and awake all your courage, all that bravery that has been asleep for too long, and take a risk. If you are a strong-willed person, this rune will bring you luck. Fortune favors the bold. This rune gives a certain sense of relief because even though you most certainly will experience a big change, while under the influence of this rune, the problems that might be expected will not arise. This sudden change will lead you to long-term benefits, even if you have to put up with an uncomfortable or stressful situation for a short while. Even in loss, you will find unsuspected gains. Discipline and defense of one's own principles leads to success and greater understanding. Count on your inner strength. Alright, my dear friends, I hope you have enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next one, and tack för idag.